Classic NBA podcast. I am Jason, and with me as usual is Rich. Hello, Rich.
What's going on?
Not too much. Just got some pretty interesting and exciting conference finals going on. The Heat against the Celtics, the Lakers against the Nuggets. Exactly what we were expecting here for the 2020 NBA playoffs.
Right. Well, if you a prior episode we talked about like weird NBA seasons, and one of the constant themes in the weird NBA seasons were like ridiculous playoff upsets. And this year, of course, without no home court advantage, with everybody in the bubble, like it seemed ripe to have a lot of upsets and a lot of, kind of teams that we didn't expect to make it to the conference finals. And I think even then we still are pretty surprised by a few of the teams. Less so the Celtics, less so the Lakers, but definitely the Heat and the Nuggets kind of coming as a surprise. But again, if you listen to that episode, the one constant of any weird NBA season is very weird teams in the NBA finals, very weird champions, huge upsets, all that sort of stuff. And it's exactly how it played out this year.
Yeah, we should have known it was coming. We should have thought there. We should have realized, But yes, so we'll see how it goes out. We're in the midst of those conference finals. But we thought, it'd be fun to look a little bit at the histories of the teams that are in the conference finals and talk about their shared players. So we're going to talk about some key players who played for both the Heat and the Celtics, and some key players who played for both the Lakers and the Nuggets, as well as a few notable trades that those teams had. So
let's not sugarcoat a little bit, though. Not to interrupt you. I do remember the way that this show started was you and I texting back and forth in the midst of the Heat appearing like they have been dominating the Bucks, and the series wasn't quite over yet. And I remember you saying, "Oh God, I can't stand a Heat versus Celtics in the conference finals." And I said, "I know, I'm kind of annoyed about it too." And you said, "At least maybe we can have a show about Antoine Walker." So he is the reason. The shimmy, we shimmied. The show was all in memory of the shimmy of Antoine Walker, and then we decided, you know what, that's actually not the worst idea. Let's talk about guys who played for both the Heat and the Celtics, and then guys who played for whatever the Western Conference Finals is going to be, whether it's going to be Clippers, Lakers, or it was going to be whatever. Rockets, Nuggets, whatever combination we were going to do. And we ended up with a pretty fun, interesting show with some fun names and some interesting people to talk about. And I will say here at the top, people are probably in their head coming up with, Heat versus Celtics. I know exactly who they're going to talk about. We try to pick people that were a little bit outside the box. We'll talk about the big players. We'll talk about some of the other guys, but we try to pick guys that at least, we haven't talked. We're not going to talk about Shaq. You know what I mean? Like there's no point in talking about Shaquille O'Neal on the show. You know about Shaquille O'Neal. We've talked about Shaquille O'Neal. That's fine. We're not going to do that. But we are going to have some fun guys in here. So you don't worry when you hear us be like, when I start talking about Sherman Douglas, you're like, what the hell? Sherman Douglas? Come on, guys. There's so many other Heat Celtics players. What about Ray Allen? We wanted to make it fun and interesting, and I know our listeners will appreciate that. So.
Yes, that is an excellent point. Yes. So, the Heat Celtics, there was more synergy there than with the Lakers and Nuggets. Not a lot. One kind of famous example, but I think the other ones were a little bit, a couple of guys I didn't even think about having been on the list. So it's kind of interesting. Guys
were you surprised? At least I was kind of surprised at how few Lakers and Nuggets there were. Like, I mean, given that the Nuggets have been, a franchise for years and years and years, they have a 20-year head start basically on the Miami Heat. But the Heat and Celtics is filled with players that were on the same teams and filled with guys that played for both. Whereas the Lakers and the Nuggets, I mean, we're really, digging deep here. We're going from the mid-'70s into, the present. And even then you actually looked at the prior Denver Nuggets, the old original Denver Nuggets, and the Minneapolis Lakers, and there wasn't anybody there either. It's like, I guess it probably speaks to one, constant that has happened throughout the history of these two franchises, that usually the Lakers are good and usually the Nuggets are not that good. So I think that might be an issue where the Lakers go, no, we don't really want any of your players. Whereas the Heat and the Celtics, largely, after the Heat, it sort of wiped away their expansion, have been pretty solid for years and years and years. And the Celtics, of course, it goes without saying, are a pretty solid team as well. Franchise, the Celtics.
Yeah.
Breaking news.
Right. And it seems like historically every time that they're, the Nuggets have been good, the Lakers have just generally been better.
Yeah.
And again, the Denver, unfortunately, has not had a lot of, great success in their history. And the Lakers obviously had. Yeah, that is kind of weird. I mean, there's only been, there have been 4 trades in between the Lakers and Denver, in their history. Actually only 5 between Boston and Miami. Obviously that's over a shorter, period of time, given, Miami only has about a 30-year history. But, it's kind of hard to know why that is, but it does seem like has sort of been a lack of interaction in the team's histories. I think they've been met in the playoffs, the Nuggets and Lakers 3 or 4 times, and the the Lakers, I believe, have won every time, where, Miami and Boston, a little bit more of an equal rivalry, between those franchises, especially in recent years.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's, we'll start off here, I think, with some trades, some famous trades. We'll start out with the Heat Celtics one. We'll bounce to Lakers and Nuggets. And that's how we're going to do. I'll talk, Jason will talk, we'll bounce back and forth between the two. So I'll start here with some notable transactions between the Heat and the Celtics. So the first one we're going to talk about is going to relate to a bigger topic we're going to have later in the show. And that's January 10th, 1992, with the Boston Celtics trading then their point guard Brian Shaw to the Miami Heat for Sherman Douglas. And Brian Shaw was an effective rookie on the semi-rebuilding 1989 Boston Celtics. The Celtics were good, but they weren't great. They were trying to get the last few years that they could out of Bird and try to kind of work around him. And they did a pretty decent job about it. Of course, obviously Reggie Lewis tragically passes away in a few years. You have the Len Bias. You have all these sort of things that befall the Boston Celtics. But this is a year where they're trying to kind of get things together, kind of figure out where they're going to be, figure out what the next generation of Celtics teams are going to be. So you have Brian Shaw, who's a pretty decent point guard for the team, does some good stuff, an effective rookie. He opts then the next year to play in Italy instead of return to the NBA. By 1991, he comes back to the Celtics. Again, a big piece on a pretty good Celtics team at this time, 50 plus wins. They're not the Celtics of old, but they're back kind of, they're there in the, in the mix, at least on the East. So then 17 games into the 1992 season, Brian Shaw falls out of the starting rotation. D Brown, who had kind of jet set it into, kind of superstardom based off the slam dunk contest and his play on the court. D Brown kind of moves up the ladder and he gets more of the point guard duties and gets more of sort of the star shine. And maybe he is a member of that next generation of the Celtics team. So Shaw has moved on to Miami for Sherman Douglas. And we'll talk about Sherman, at length a little bit, but Shaw would play, 3 so years in Miami before moving on to, Orlando, Golden State, Philadelphia, Portland, and then probably most famously, even though it was like least productive years, I'd say most famously Los Angeles, where of course he ends his career with some rings and some big time highlights in the playoffs or whatnot. Even though, like, again, it's one of those weird things where like he had been probably more effective in all of his other 11 seasons or whatever, but he comes to the Lakers and wins 3 titles, and that's where you kind of remember him more than anywhere. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is sort of because he really was like, he was kind of, I remember him sort of people thinking he was going to be a promising, really good young player, and he had a solid career, but he was never. It seemed like he might have been primed to be like a star, to be like a multi-time All-Star, not all-time great or anything, but he definitely was, pretty notable name, and then just kind of fell into more just like solid role player, but for championship team, but definitely, he did that real well, despite, as you said. Bouncing around a lot before with some, generally not great teams, up until, kind of settling into Los Angeles and, finding kind of the exact right spot.
Yeah, I think I actually have a cover or a magazine, like I think it's a January. I would get it, but that'd be very unprofessional of me to try to rifle through a magazine while we're trying to do this. But there's a basketball digest, and there's a flea market that's near my house every year. And a few years ago, I bought like 100 old basketball digests or whatever. And I remember there's like, I don't think he's on the cover, but he's definitely like one of the featured stories. It's like Brian Shaw, like the next great NBA point guard. And it's like, you read it, you're like, yeah, I mean, he's leading the, and like, I mean, let's be, we'll talk about it a lot with, Sherman Douglas, but like, the Celtics were grasping for like that. Who's going to be our next star? Like once Larry Bird's done, who's going to be that guy that assumes the duties? Who's going to be the guy that kind of leads us? And at points it was D Brown. At points it was, Sherman Douglas would even be mentioned, in that breath or whatever. And Reggie Lewis obviously was one of those. And Brian Shaw, you read this article and it's like, yeah, the Celtics believe that Brian Shaw is like the answer that they've been looking for, a point guard to lead them to the next decade. And it's like, well, I mean, not quite, but, he was definitely highly regarded at the time too. He was, we sort of know him now as just like kind of the dude who scores like 5 points in an NBA Finals game or whatever for the Lakers, or comes in off the bench or whatever. But no, he was a very, very good player for a number of years.
Yeah, absolutely. So next we have for the Nuggets and the Lakers, the trade on June 24th, 1998. It was the Denver Nuggets trading Tony Battie and Tyronn Lue to the Los Angeles Lakers for Nick Van Exel. Battie and Lue had both been drafted in that year's NBA draft. And Van Exel, this on paper would seem like a surprise because Van Exel had been an all-star during the 98 season. he was still fairly young. Him along with Eddie Jones, Cedric Ceballos were kind of the key building blocks of a post Showtime Lakers resurgence. And even before Shaq and Kobe came along in 1996, they finished 53 wins, were 6th in SRS with a really young team. So they were on the rise, even not even considering Shaq and Kobe. But in '98, there had been issues previously with Coach Del Harris and Jerry West. There was an incident where Van Exel pushed a referee and it's been suspended for multiple games. But the real tipping point was an infamous moment where during a Lakers practice around the time of their Western Conference series against Utah, which they were swept, it was toward the end of this, Van Exel made a team huddle. They were supposed to say 1, 2, 3 team, and Van Exel jokingly said 1, 2, 3 Cancun. So he later just said, "Hey, I was just trying to keep the team joking. I didn't mean anything by it. I didn't quit on my team." But he'd actually already, I guess, given up his starting spot to Derek Fisher late in the season. He'd been sidelined with some knee problems, and he was kind of slow coming back. So, they just decided, both teams decided to move on. And, the Lakers also, I think, were trying to kind of looking to cut some salary with the lockout coming up. And, the salary cap sure was going to, kind of go in. So was ended up traded to Denver for some draft picks. But he never actually ended up playing for the Lakers. He was traded to Boston for Travis Knight. And Lou, of course, was a famous role player for the Lakers and a solid one for several years for their championship run. Of course, most famously, stepped over by Allen Iverson during the 2001 finals. But, Lou won those 3 championships. So it kind of got the last laugh there.
Absolutely, yeah, and the Van Exel thing too. When anybody who knows Van Exel style play, definitely a guy who enjoyed the ball in his hands and enjoyed kind of getting shots up and kind of controlling the offense. And a big reason, as well, you're talking about that, this Lakers team trying to kind of evolve into the next step is that now when you have an emerging Kobe Bryant and you realize that you might have something in this guy, he might actually be something. You got Shaquille O'Neal, you have those sort of guys. It makes all the sense in the world that the team was kind of slowly but surely move their way over to, someone like a Derek Fisher who really can affect the game without really, having the ball in his hands and needing to kind of run the offense and run the show. So it makes sense. And yeah, sure. When you add in all the other stuff with Van Exel and all the other baggage as well, it made all sense in the world why they made that trade. But it's still it's given the return they got, because Van Exel, we're talking, he's 26 at this time too. You know what I mean? He's right. I think he had just made the All-Star game for the first time ever. Right. He was there, it was but yeah, it was a bold move at the time. And obviously it ended up paying off, hugely, but tough decision to make at that time to, one of your leading scorers, one of your top guys on your team, you're going to trade him and your return is a guy you don't even want. And then, a role player is pretty wild. And Denver, had they capitalized or been good during that time, they might have actually, had a good deal there, but they were Denver Nuggets and, they don't deserve, they didn't deserve to win those terrible uniforms anyway. So,
oh yeah. Yeah. Okay, here's the weird thing about the Nuggets' bad 90s uniforms. So we both agree that they're terrible. But they're terrible for an interesting reason, because most teams during that time went from outrageous patterns or colors or design and went to something, went from something that was traditional and boring, I'm using air quotes around boring, to something, crazy and wacky. But the Nuggets had crazy and wacky in the 80s, and it was great.
They had colors, they had, pastel colors, they had purples, they had everything you wanted in the 90s. And they're like, you know what? How about brown? What we should do? Brown, you know what? Yeah. Everybody loves about Denver? The dirt, the sand at Rocky Mountain Park. Yeah, perfect. We'll just go with dirt. We'll go with a really dark blue and then brown. It's perfect. Yeah. And red maybe sometimes too. Oh my God. Yeah. You're absolutely right. You would have thought that they would have went into the 90s and just said, oh, well, we're good. We're already ahead of the game. We already got the silly uniforms with all the colors. No, they go, you know what? Let's strip all the color down and go with brown. It's just, it's tough. I don't mind, the jerseys themselves are okay. They're whatever. But where they went from was so good. And I do love how today's Nuggets have arguably my favorite uniform in basketball, the black Nuggets jersey with the rainbow in the mountains is just chef's kiss. Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah, agreed.
All right, let's move to our next Heat Celtics trade. And this one's a little interesting because it is an executive trade. Yeah, some executives are on the move here. Miami Heat executive Chris Wallace is hired by the Boston Celtics in 1997. He is the director of player personnel for the Miami Heat. Depending on who you ask, he kind of credits himself with, building the Miami Heat, even though he wasn't really the GM. He was just kind of the player personnel guy, but whatever he wants to do, whatever Chris Wallace wants to do. He's had many years in the NBA, so it's fine. But anyway, the Celtics hire him in 1997 and they get a second round pick. They send a second round pick to Miami to allow him to end his contract and allow him to take the new job. So he becomes director of player personnel kind of under a few of the other guys for a few years until he becomes the official general manager in the 2000-2001 season. And it doesn't go, I don't know. We'll talk about it a little bit with the Antoine Walker. It doesn't go great for him in Boston. Some short-sighted trades. He does get them into a few, deep playoff runs, but probably ends up being, worse in the long run. Famously trades Joe Johnson for Tony Delk and Rodney Rogers. Trades for Vin Baker while Vin Baker is battling alcoholism, and Baker makes, between, $12 to $13 million per year. Plays, barely plays and is pretty ineffective. And by 2003, Chris Wallace is gone. But I guess it didn't cost Miami too much. It cost a second round pick, and I think there was another player involved in this as well. But they maybe got the last laugh because they would go on to win a title, in the early 2000s, and go on to bigger and better heights, while Boston is still trying to kind of figure out what was going on during that time period as well. And yeah, I wouldn't say he did a bad job. I think he inherited a pretty good Boston Celtics team, but probably did a lot of, short-sighted things that ended up kind of tanking the team for a couple years. So. Yeah,
they weren't good at the time he came there, but they had the pieces, obviously, he drafts. I think they had drafted Walker already, but he would at least be involved with the pick of Paul Pierce.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously that one being important. So that obviously, one of the better picks for them in their history. So obviously that was strong. Yeah, but Danny Ainge begrudgingly probably a better choice.
Yeah, unfortunately, we hate to admit it, but right. Yeah, because then we'll also go to Memphis, and he do some decent work in Memphis as well. Of course, get that team, to a certain level. And now I don't know what I don't think he's doing anything right now. Or he might still be. I don't know. He might still be in Memphis. I forget what Chris Wallace is doing right now.
I don't think. Yeah,
maybe at like a consultant level, but yeah, he's not. He's obviously not running the show anymore.
I believe you're correct. Yes. Yes. So now going back to Nuggets Lakers, August 3rd, 1990, the Nuggets traded 2 second round draft picks to the Los Angeles Lakers for Orlando Wooldridge. And these picks ended up actually being conditional and were never exercised. So basically, the Nuggets got Orlando Wooldridge for free. And we'll get into greater detail, but this was the first season for the Nuggets under Paul Westhead. Of course, had been previously the Lakers coach in the early 80s. And Paul Westhead just really transitioned from being like methodical, being like coach controls the pace and calls the plays, and the players execute them, into we're just going to go up and down the court and just go out and crazy and throw shots all the time. And they played really fast, and they played next to no defense, and they set some records that we'll get into a bit later, but that led Wooldridge to go from having averaged 12.7 points per game the year before to 25.1 points per game, also a career high of 6.8 rebounds per game. He actually was among the leaders in the NBA in scoring through December until he was sidelined after eye surgery due to a detached retina during a game collision. So kind of near the end of Wooldridge's career, is the effective portion of his career, but sort of an interesting, odd season for him. And, the Nuggets, I know this Nuggets, the 91 Nuggets team is among your favorite bad teams.
Oh, I love them. Yeah. And Paul Westhead too. I love this transition that he made, because he always talked about when he comes to, the Lakers, and he's like, all right, Kareem, all right, Magic, we're going to do it my way. And they're like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, get out of here, dude. And he gets out of there pretty quickly. He tells, Jerry Buss, hey, we're going to do things my way. And Jerry Buss goes, I don't know what you thought, but that's not how kind of things work here. It's Magic, Kareem, and me. We kind of run the show here. So he goes away, he gets sent away. I know he has a year with the Bulls that they don't really do anything. They're pretty bad. Then he goes to Loyola Marymount. He basically has to rebuild his entire career as the head coach of, just kind of a mid-level NCAA team, and they do incredible. They do really, really well. They get Hank Gathers, they get guys like Bo Gimbel. There's a 30 for 30 all about, the guru of Go, all about his run in Loyola Marymount, and he basically just decides, hey, we're not going to win by just working the other team's slow-paced offense. Let's just run. Let's just go. Let's go and see what happens. And it works great. Loyola Marymount's good. Then he goes to the Nuggets and he does the same thing. Unfortunately, they're not good, but hey, I love their style. They score, 120 points a game. They give up 130. That's not ideal. Ideally, you score more than you give up. That's the best way to win. He had a different philosophy, I guess. I don't know exactly what they wanted to do, but I do enjoy watching them play. And anytime there's an old classic game I find on YouTube of this era, Denver Nuggets, it's pretty awesome. And I think my favorite part too is that you think, oh man, well they're scoring 120 points per game. They're probably shooting threes. No, they're just like running up and taking mid-range jumpers and running back and giving up a point and then getting the ball back. It's fun to watch. I mean, it's interesting to watch, but it is. It's a pretty prolific team there, and it's kind of this mishmash combination of some good players, some bad players, some old players, a bunch of other things. It's probably not great, but man, I enjoy watching these guys play. So
sure. Usually
when they're giving up like ungodly, I think one time I think they gave up 107 to the Suns or 108 to the Suns in like one half, which is not great. You don't want to do that. So that's
this team. They had Walter Davis played 13 games for this team at the end of his career. He averaged 18.7 points per game in 26 minutes, so that's good. Michael Adams was actually the leading scorer, and he attempted 8.5 3-pointers a game, which was a lot back then. Only shot 29.6% from 3-point, so that's probably not as strong. I do not ever recall hearing of Blair Rasmussen, but apparently he played for the Nuggets for several years in the 80s. He was a center. I'm guessing probably he would be a Arena special there, as would be my guess. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf was a rookie on this team.
Anthony Mason's there too.
That's
my favorite part of this whole team is that there's Anthony Mason.
Avery Johnson. Yeah, Anthony Mason played 3 games for this team. Avery Johnson played 21 games. Let's see, T.R. Dunn at the end of his career. There's
they cycled through a lot of players. Yeah, which is
a lot of guys.
Yeah, I don't know if guys got hurt. Guys said this sucks. Guys said
Tim Legler was on the team.
Yeah, they have 21 rostered guys for this season. Right, which you got to appreciate.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, we need to. We're going to need to do some more follow up on this team.
Yes, I would love to do that. Yeah. Let's definitely do that. But yeah, no, it's you look at their offensive rating. The right idea. Paul Westside, a few years into the history, forgot that like efficiency is important too, because they were like 21st in offensive rating and dead last in defensive rating. So they scored a lot of points per game, and they didn't do it very efficiently. So that ends up not working out too well. So that's when you go 20 and 62. So
yeah, it's not a good record.
All right, let's move on to our next Heat Celtics trade here, our last Heat Celtics trade that we're going to talk about here, and this one will relate to somebody we're going to talk about even more here. Antoine Walker goes to Miami. It is a 5-team trade on August 2nd, 2005. Stick with me here because I'm going to mention everybody that gets moved here. All right, you ready?
All right.
5-team trade. Boston Celtics trade Antoine Walker to the Miami Heat. Okay? We could just end right there, but what's the fun in that? Let's talk some more. The Memphis Grizzlies trade Andre Emmett, James Posey, and Jason Williams to the Miami Heat. And that actually ends up being a great trade for them. Because a lot of those guys end up being, key role players in that title team, especially Posey and James Williams. Or Jason Williams, I should say. The Memphis Grizzlies trade Greg Ostertag to the Utah Jazz. I don't know if I ever remember Greg Ostertag playing for the Memphis Grizzlies, but I enjoy that in 2005, the Utah Jazz going, you know what, the key, we need Greg Ostertag.
It's important.
Like we're just not clicking to that level that we need. What do we need? What's the missing piece? Yes, of course, Greg Ostertag. So that doesn't go too well. The Boston Celtics, they get from the Miami Heat Albert Morales, I don't know who that is. That's probably not good. Quintel Woods, I do know who that is, but he's bad.
Also not good.
A 2006 second-round draft pick and a 2008 second-round draft pick go to the Boston Celtics. Not great. Some more guys. The Miami Heat, they trade Eddie Jones. The aforementioned Eddie Jones. We talked about him in the Lakers part. He goes to the Memphis Grizzlies. The Miami Heat then also trade Rasul Butler to the New Orleans Oklahoma City Hornets. The New Orleans Oklahoma City Hornets trade Roberto Duran's to the Miami Heat. And the Utah Jazz trade Curtis Borchard to the Boston Celtics. So, no, we're not done yet. The Utah Jazz trade Raul Lopez to the Memphis Grizzlies, and the Utah Jazz trade Kirk Snyder to the New Orleans Oklahoma City Hornets. Goddamn, I just imagining like trying to figure out who goes where. that I would love to be in the room just for one of these conversations where a 5-team trade goes down, where 15 players move, and just trying to juggle all these names. At a certain point, it just becomes like, does Roberto Duranus or whoever the fuck need to go to the Miami Heat? Can we just like not have him involved in the trade? what do we do? But I love these trades. I love these big trades, and works out great for Miami and less so for basically everybody else on this list. So
yes. So I'd like to clarify something that. So apparently, okay. So he was traded. I'm sorry. I'm back on Greg Ostertag, as I obviously should.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. What do we got?
So, okay, because Greg Ostertag never actually played for the Jazz. So in
the Grizzlies rather.
He did play for the Jazz. Obviously, yes, mentally, I wanted to just somehow, I wanted to just kind of fool everybody. No, okay. So in 96 through 04, he plays for the Jazz, which, we realized. 2005, he plays for the Kings. He was a Kings free agent signee, went to the Kings, but then he was traded. I'm trying to understand the sequence of events here, because the 5-team trade that you describe, of course, occurs, but there's also a trade where he, along with Bobby Jackson, go to the Grizzlies for Bonzi Wells.
And I think that's the same day. So maybe for some weird maneuvering of salary caps, the Grizzlies had to own Greg Ostertag for 2 minutes.
He wasn't officially part of that. He wasn't officially part of the big trade, but was essentially part of the large trade. In reality.
Yeah. So the way it looks like is that and this was it was a Bonzi Wells trade as well, which again, it's ridiculous.
Right.
All these names moving for nothing. What are you doing? They're Bonzi Wells. What do we do?
Yeah.
So the Sacramento Kings need Bonzi Wells, so they trade Bobby Jackson and Greg Ostertag, and then immediately trade Ostertag to the Jazz for Raul Lopez, Kirk Snyder, and Curtis Borchardt.
So he was acquired by the Jazz via trade.
Yes.
I see. So he was included in that. Okay, because the Kings trade happens first,
right? And then he gets packaged, and because they needed Raul Lopez, Jason. They needed Raul Lopez.
Okay, I remember this trade when it happened. And I was confused then, and it hasn't really
it hasn't helped. Yeah, there's a lot of.
All I know is that Kirk Snyder, of course, one of the greatest New Orleans, Oklahoma City Hornet in NBA history, obviously. So I guess he's canonical Pelican now. But
yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Oh man, what a weird glitch that ESPN. I hope somebody gets fired for this one. If you click Kirk Snyder's name on ESPN.com, it goes to a Donald Royal player profile page. Someone's gonna have to pay for this. I mean, come on.
We need to report that. Yeah.
So sloppy shops going on over there at ESPN. I mean, when you click Kirk Snyder, I want Kirk Snyder, not Donald Royal. Come on.
I would like to point out that although you describe this as inconsequential for everyone involved, I know that you don't mean the Heat, obviously.
Yes, it worked out great for the Heat, and worked out pretty much in no way whatsoever for anybody else. So.
I will say Bonzi Wells going to the Kings led them to their final playoff appearance 15 years ago. So, yes. So that
does
was
that say more about the Kings or
yeah, well,
but you're right. It's right. It's a fact that Bonzi Wells did help the Kings go to their final playoff. But we'll talk a little bit more about Anton Walker going to Miami, because that'll be a breakout here when we talk about Anton Walker. But that is it for my fun Heat Celtics trades. But you have a few more, or one more at least, Lakers Nuggets fun trade.
I do, yes. June 26th, 1978, the Denver Nuggets traded Ron Boone and 2 1979 second-round picks.
I was hoping you were going to say a car.
Charlie Scott, a car. And
the 2 1979 Cutlass Supremes.
Yes.
That's one thing I do miss about old school sports, is that guys could get traded for literally bags of balls sometimes, or cars or private jets or whatever. Those things don't happen anymore. They, maybe they do kind of under the table, but they don't announce it anymore, because it'd be embarrassing if Ron Boone got traded for 2 cars. But sorry.
It's okay. So the key acquisition here is Ron Boone, who actually, you may, if you're a aficionado of the 1970s NBA, you may be like, Jason, Ron Boone never played for the Nuggets. What are you talking about? Well, Ron Boone actually had been acquired by Denver in another trade with Kansas City, the Kings. He played 2 years with the Kings after coming from the ABA. Which also involved Darnell Hillman. So a lot of old ABA players involved in these transactions. And Scott only played the very beginning of his career in the NBA. We're going to dig into him more, but he'd been a hero of the 1976 Celtics championship run, was kind of shipped out as that team aged and needed to rebuild in 78. So had been with the Lakers for a year and a half. the Lakers were an okay team, in 78 but kind of wanted to revamp, for Ron Boone. Fortunately, didn't really work out well for Ron. He ended up kind of sulking in a diminished role with the Lakers. I believe he was described negatively in the Jeff Pearlman Showtime book, at the very beginning of the 19, Magic's rookie year. Boone is still there, but then gets traded pretty soon to the Jazz, where he's described as definitely a malcontent at that point. So, but Boone ends up going back to Utah with the Jazz, where he'd had his best days in the ABA as part of the Utah Stars, and has I believe he's been an announcer with the Jazz for a long time. I don't know if he's been continuously with the organization throughout that whole time, but that obviously ended up long term working out well for him.
Absolutely, yeah, and he's a name that your astute 70s NBA people would know, but a solid enough player, like a guy who definitely probably gets underrated a little bit because of the era that he plays in, and right. But yeah, a really really good player if you go back and look at some of the numbers and look at the impact he had for a few teams. Yeah,
even for the Kings, he was about 29-30 at that point. So, nearing the end of his career. Of course, careers were shorter back then. But, played fairly well in the NBA up until that point. But the Lakers were not a good fit for him, unfortunately.
Yeah, and of course, famous from breaks in the not breaks of the game, loose balls. He's in the ABA, and he's an important part of the Utah Stars. He's an important part of the Dallas Chaparrals. Like he's a big time ABA guy, and a guy that I think one of the many guys that gets lost, with the transition to the NBA, because he comes into the NBA already, like you said, he's kind of on the downswing of his career, even though he had basically a decade of pretty good player, at least a half a decade of pretty good play, but unfortunately it was done in the ABA, so kind of largely forgot to history, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's get to some of our featured players here. So again, we're going to talk about the big guys. We're going to talk about the big guns here, but we wanted to talk about some interesting players, some fun players. And we'll start off with, as I mentioned about the last trade, Antoine Walker, who we got to start out with. Who the first, when we thought Heat Celtics, he's the guy that came to my mind immediately. I don't know why. Came to your mind immediately too. Maybe just Antoine Walker just comes to our mind immediately very often. We think of the shimmy. We love Antoine Walker. I don't know. Yeah.
We love it. Yeah. Anton Walker, fabulous, fun, wonderful NBA player and personality. Just, just a joy to watch. Maybe not a joy, if you're looking for your team to win, but necessarily,
or an investment portfolio, but
well, yeah, there's that as well. But, in terms of just like a guy who's just like makes the game a little more fun and does silly stuff. And, but, was really, really good and talented, and also was a successful NBA player. Maybe had he had a little bit better shot selection, maybe, could have been better, but, hey, there are no fours. So right, if there had been fours, maybe, Anton Walker might have been the greatest player in NBA history. It's possible.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't think now, we look at another guy, we talk about this all the time, guys who, depending on when their era was, like nobody would care about Antoine. Like Anton Walker would be encouraged now, but in those, in those days, I remember in the early 2000s, it was like, what are you doing? The shot selection sucks. Whereas now, you get yelled at for, putting the ball on the floor and not taking a three. So it's just about when you play. A lot of ways, but Anton Walker, local-ish to my area. He went to Mount Carmel High School in Chicago. He plays with future NBA or NFL quarterback, I should say, Donovan McNabb, in the same high school as well. He's the 6th overall pick in the 1996 NBA draft. He, of course, goes to the University of Kentucky and plays pretty well there. As well. The 1996 NBA draft, of course, is absolutely loaded, like ungodly loaded. Like, oh my God, how many people are on this draft? Allen Iverson, Ray Allen, Steve Nash, Kobe Bryant, Peja Stojakovic, Marcus Camby, Stephon Marbury, many, many more. We could be here all day talking about that 1996 NBA draft. But he ends up, being one of the best players of that entire draft. He finishes his career 14th in total win shares among his draft class, 31st in win shares per 48, and 10th in value over replacement players. So I think he fits in pretty well. With those guys, and you're talking about some all-time great. You're talking about, surefire, no-doubt Hall of Famers, and like Allen Iverson, Ray Allen, Steve Nash, Kobe Bryant, Peja Stojakovic to an extent as well. I mean, we're talking really, really, really good players in this draft. So anyway, he goes to the Boston Celtics again in the Boston Celtics hunt for who their next star is going to be. And Antoine Walker, more than D. Brown, more than Sherman Douglas, more than Brian Shaw, more than almost anybody since, Larry Bird and really since Reggie Lewis, assumes the star role and immediately comes in and he's a star. He makes the all rookie first team. He leads his team in scoring at 17.5 points per game. He leads the team in rebounding at 9 rebounds per game. Sure, the Celtics have their worst year in franchise history. They, go 15 and 67, but still, you got a guy. He's a good player. He's putting up numbers. He's doing all that sort of stuff. So they decide the next year, 97-98, that what we're going to do is we're going to bring in, not necessarily because you had Anton Walker, but because he was a successful coach, you're going to bring in Anton Walker's former college coach, Rick Pitino from the University of Kentucky. He's going to come in. He's going to coach the Celtics. He's going to be the GM. He's going to run the show, and things are going to go well. And yeah, not really. We'll talk about that here in a sec. But for Antoine Walker, things go well. He makes the All-Star team, the first All-Star berth of his career. He scores 22.4 points per game, 10.2 rebounds per game. The Celtics still stink, but that's not his fault because, well, partially his fault, but hell, he's getting the numbers. He's a sophomore, so things are going pretty well. 1998 NBA draft, the Celtics would go on. Of course, we talked about this a little bit earlier. They're going to draft Paul Pierce with the 10th pick in the draft, and that forms kind of the new core of the Celtics, the new Celtics dynasty, kind of, with Paul Pierce and Antoine Walker and Tony Delk and Ron Mercer and a few other guys that aren't that good, and not Tim Duncan. And well, that's fine. They want Tim Duncan here. They don't get Tim Duncan. They get Paul Pierce. They get a Super Bowl guy. So maybe
if they'd have kept Chauncey Billups, maybe they'd have been all right.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, there's some Rick's got some explaining to do here. Yeah. So anyway,
Chris Wallace. Maybe we'll blame Chris Wallace.
Yes, Chris Wallace and Rick Pitino. You guys stink. So exactly. 98, 99, and that's why Chris Wallace, again, where I mentioned how he was just kind of like the director of player personnel, quote unquote, because he had Rick Pitino, who was kind of the GM, so he could, or whatever he was. The czar, whatever the hell they call it. I forget what they called him at that year. Anyway, 98-99, Boston goes 19-31. They missed the playoffs yet again. 99-2000, they're rebuilding. They're ready to go. And they kind of stink again. They missed the playoffs in Rick Pitino. This season features the famous Larry Bird isn't walking through that door quote, which again, here's the exact thing. It's from the Washington Post in March 1st, 2000. It said the Celtics blew a 20-point third-quarter lead to the Dallas Mavericks on Monday and lost 96-94 on Wednesday night on Vince Carter's buzzer-beating three-pointer to drop to 23-34 for the year. Asked what he said to his team after the latest loss, Pitino said he would not, quote, succumb to negativity, but he soon did just that. Well, we've played hard the whole year. We're going to be positive every day. You are the people being negative, he told reporters. You and the fans. Okay. I mean, Rick, you missed the playoffs 3 times. It's Boston. What are we doing here? And this is then what gets to the famous quote here. Quote, Larry Bird is not walking through that door, fans. Kevin McHale is not walking through that door. And Robert Parrish is not walking through that door, Pitino said. And if you expect them to walk through that door, they're going to be gray and old. What we are is young, exciting, hardworking, and we're going to improve. People don't realize that. And as soon as they realize that 3 guys are not coming through that door, the better this town will be for all of us. So, Pitino plants his flag. 2001, he's jetted midway through the season. They let him go. They bring a new coach, Jim O'Brien. Celtics missed the playoffs yet again, but it leads to 2001, 2002, arguably the best year of Antoine Walker and Paul Pierce and this early Celtics, early 2000 Celtics. Anton Walker has his best overall season. Celtics go 49-33. First playoff berth in 7 years, which is a very long time in Boston, by the way. He's second on the team in scoring, 22 points, first in rebounds, 9, and first in assists as well with 5. Pierce and Walker took the team all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, where they fell to the New Jersey Nets in 6 games. Walker during this year, as we said, a prolific three-point shooter. His attempts, 645, just shy of the all-time NBA record of 678 set by George McLeod for Dallas in 1995-96, again with a shorter three-point line. So Walker's 645 is a pretty prolific number for this era. And of course, this record, has not held up given, what's going on in the NBA today. But still, I think pretty remarkable. This year is still 21st all time, which is saying something given where the NBA is at this time. Like, given what we see on a daily basis, on a game-to-game basis, what we see from, people like James Harden, what we see from, guys like Steph Curry, the fact that, this year in 2001, 2002 still ranks, top 25 all time in 3-point attempts, is pretty wild. And that's why like, it was shocking to the system to see Antoine Walker put up as many threes as he put up in this season. It was pretty wild. He didn't make a very good percentage of those, but goddamn it, he shot them. And hell, the Celtics, they went 49-33. So, worked out pretty well. And, the most famous game of that Eastern Conference Finals, we should talk about as well. Kind of an all time great, NBA playoff game as well. The Celtics are down 21 entering the fourth quarter. Walker delivers an impassioned speech on the bench, tells them, we need a spark. Let's go. It works. The Celtics are up for 41 points in the fourth quarter alone, 19 of which were contributed in that quarter by Paul Pierce. Walker puts up 23 points and 12 rebounds and 4 assists in the entire game. And the Celtics win 94-90 to put them up 2-1 in the series. And got everybody thinking that, oh my God, we're going to go to the NBA Finals. And it wasn't to be, unfortunately. The New Jersey Nets came back and did it. But we'll quickly go over the next few years here. 2002-2003, Walker makes his third All-Star team, but the Celtics regress. They lose in the Eastern Conference semifinals to New Jersey again. And then 2003-2004, just before the season, Walker is traded to the Mavericks. The Celtics give up on Anton Walker and go in a new direction. And I was all in at this time for this Mavericks team. I remember as a kid loving the idea of Antoine Walker on the Dallas Mavericks. They get Anton Jameson this season too, and they're going small ball. You got Nash, you got Finley, you got Dirk, you got Walker. Anton Jameson's off the bench. It's going to work. It's going to be great. And it was just okay. They won 52 games, lost in the first round. And Dallas goes, that didn't really work. And they trade Anton Walker to Atlanta for Jason Terry, and doesn't really work out very well for the Atlanta Hawks, I would say there. As the foremost Anton Walker / Atlanta Hawks fan, what do you think of this deal for them?
Well, it didn't maybe quite work out as we were hoping it would work out. But, we don't want to disparage Atlanta Hawks legend Antoine Walker too much. It was a fabulous half a season. There were many shimmies. He didn't perform too bad, actually. The shooting, the 3-point shooting wasn't great, but he was below 30% that year. So that wasn't a struggle. They didn't take nearly as many attempts in Atlanta as he had in other places. Yeah, he that was not a good team in any case. So somebody had to take the shots. Why not Antoine Walker? Was Al Harrington going to be taking the shots? You want Josh Smith taking all the shots? Come on. The options there were not exactly
right.
Fantastic. So yeah, I think I think it worked out as well as it was meant to work out.
Okay, I'm with you on that, but it works out a little bit better for Dallas and Jason Terry. Obviously, he goes to multiple NBA Finals, wins the title with Dallas and whatnot. But still, you're right. Yeah. You're right. But anyway, it's all null and void because on February 24, 2005, Anton Walker is traded back to the Boston Celtics in a deal that sends Gary Payton, Tom Gugliotta, Michael Stewart, and a first-round pick to the Atlanta Hawks.
I will say Gary Payton never played for the Hawks. In fact, he gets bought out and goes back to the Celtics. I think they had to change the rule after that.
Yes. It was a little weird when a day later Gary Payton was just like, walks right back to the Celtics. And they're like, wait a minute.
Right. Yes.
Can't do that. But they did. Anyway, so Walker starts all the 24 remaining games for the Celtics that year. He averages 16.3 points per game, 8.3 rebounds per game. Celtics advanced to the playoffs, but then they lost in a 7-game series, a hard-fought 7-game series to the Indiana Pacers. And so that's that. And then we get to August 2nd, 2005, as we mentioned. Anton Walker is moved in the giant trade, the largest deal in NBA history, a 5-team, 13-player deal that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And that moves him to the Miami Heat, the kind of upstart Miami Heat. And Anton Walker fits in well. 2005, 2006, he plays mostly off the bench, rotates between both forward positions. He struggles early to kind of, adjust to his role off the bench. He's not a lead scorer. He's not a top guy anymore. But by the end of the year, he's a big force. Averages, 12.2 points per game, 5.1 rebounds per game, is the team's, primary scorer off the bench, leads the team overall in 3-point shots, and increases the percentages across the board too. He has less attempts in some way, but he's also being way more efficient as well, which helps out a bunch. And in the playoffs, he really, really steps his game up. His production goes up a bunch. Becomes the third leading scorer for the team. Big 3-point baskets, 20 points in 4 different playoff games, 23, against the New Jersey Nets to kind of close them out in the conference semifinals. Then they go to the NBA Finals against the Dallas Mavericks. And he posts, 13.8 points per game in the series, and the Heat win the NBA championship. So Anton Walker gets a ring. In the title clinching game, he gets 14 points and 11 rebounds as well. So a good little kind of story there. 2006, 2007, his production dips quite a bit. He averages, only 8.5 points per game, 4.3 rebounds per game. Doesn't really do much. October 24, 2007, he is sent to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Doesn't really do much there at all. Plays in 46 games, but it definitely appears his career is on his last leg. He gets dealt to the Memphis Grizzlies. He, barely plays there at all. He's actually involved in the trade that ends up being for Kevin Love in a roundabout way for the rights to Kevin Love. It's the OJ Mayo for Kevin Love trade, which I don't know. Doesn't really work out great for the Grizzlies, I would say, but probably a little bit better for the Timberwolves. He's waived pretty quickly thereafter by the Grizzlies. He signs on with a team in I don't even know what country this is. Going Bayou Mets. I don't. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. Regardless, in 2010, he is still trying to hang around. He goes into the Idaho Stampede of the NBA Developmental League and plays there for 2 years. Believe it or not, 2 years of Anton Walker in the Idaho Stampede of the NBA Developmental League. Then April 2012, he officially announces his retirement, and that is the end of Anton Walker's playing career. So there you go. Famous Heat Celtic, Antoine Walker.
Hall of Fame hasn't called yet, but we're waiting.
Soon, I'm sure. I'm sure any moment now. So
yeah, any moment now. Yeah. All right. Next, we're going to go to Nick Van Exel. Van Exel led the University of Cincinnati to a Final Four and the Elite Eight in his 2 seasons with the team. He was known as Nick the Quick, mostly for his fancy ball handling and fast moves, as well as being a guy who could definitely score in bunches. Also later known for his trademark long socks, which were sort of uncommon during that time, although didn't wear those in his Lakers dates. I kind of forget exactly at what point he started wearing the long socks, but might have been Denver, might have been afterward. But anyway, he was drafted in the second round with the Lakers in 93, 37th overall. So not necessarily, a hyped pick at the time. Eddie Jones was, a bit more hyped coming in, but, he definitely had a certain swagger that fit well with the new era of the Lakers, kind of post Showtime. Ended up making the 1994 all rookie second team. The first team guards were Penny Hardaway and Isaiah Ryder. So that's pretty good. Yeah. In 95, he was the second leading scorer on a really balanced team along, again with Jones, Vlade Divac, Ceballos, and Eldon Campbell. They won 48 games that year, and that was after the Lakers had missed the playoffs for the first time in 18 years in the 94 season. They also upset the Sonics in the first round, a lesser-known upset, but a fairly big upset, than the 94, 1-8 Sonics loss to the Nuggets. 96, the Lakers were even better. They had a returning Magic Johnson off the bench, and Van Exel definitely was considered a team leader of, kind of this pre-Shaq era of the Lakers, despite, there were personality challenges with his coach and with management. 97 and 98, now a revamped team with the new star Shaquille O'Neal, young Kobe Bryant, continued to have success during the regular season. Not as much during the playoffs, especially against the Utah Jazz. They were swept in 98, as we talked about earlier. Then he ends up, of course, we mentioned the trade to the Nuggets. And the 99 Nuggets, definitely kind of interesting team. They were coached by Mike D'Antoni in his first coaching stint, NBA coaching stint, which I kind of forgot about. And expectations may have been a bit high after the team had gotten Antonio McDyess back as a free agent after, just spending one season in Phoenix, where they had lost him before. They ended up drafting Rafe LaFrentz third overall, and also had acquired the prior year's, I believe, number 3 pick, Chauncey Billups, definitely top lottery pick. So, had some young talent, got some free agents, seemed like, okay, maybe these guys will be all right, but the team finished 14-36 at the third worst SRS in the league, and D'Antoni was gone after only one season in Denver. Whatever happened to him anyway.
I never really latched on anywhere. He has his weird thoughts of pace, and it's never going to work for him.
Weird mustache, you can't do that. Yeah. So
definitely the weird mustache was what hurt him more than anything.
It was definitely the Pringles thing for sure. But yes, the Nuggets, they actually ended up bouncing back a little bit. They were more of a middling team, 37-40 wins over the next couple seasons. Van Exel did reach his career highs in points and assists during that time. Then 2002, Van Exel, you talked about this team earlier, was traded to Dallas, where as a sixth man, he averaged 19.5 points per game in the playoffs, including a 40-point game against the Kings in a really epic Mavericks-Kings series. The Mavericks ended up winning, and before they would fall to the Spurs in a pretty epic playoff series that year. After that, he spent a season each with the Warriors, Blazers, and Spurs to close out his career, where he ended his career on the wrong side of an epic series loss to the Mavs. So
yeah, I always remember that being sad. It was like, that happened to, I think Michael Finley, one of the years. He ended up getting the last laugh, Michael Finley, but Where these guys would leave the Mavericks and then get like defeated by the Mavericks in the season after. I remember that with Van Exel too, where it's like, oh man, like, I'll join the Spurs. That'll give me the title. It's like, oh man.
Yes. Yeah. He picked an even year. He has to pick an odd year.
Exactly. Right. It's like, well, the Spurs won last year, so they're going to win this year. And it's like,
they're not good at that. That's the one thing they're not good at. Yeah. Yes, but Van Exel has had a prolific assistant coaching career in the NBA, most recently with the Grizzlies. He's been with for several seasons.
Yeah, so I always see him on the bench there, and I wonder if he'll ever get the nod as a head coach. We'll see. I don't see his name bandied about all that much, so I don't know. No,
yeah, it'd be cool. Apparently the Nets didn't look at him when they were hiring, so
right. Well,
who knows why? Yeah.
Anyway, all right. We'll move on to our next Heat Celtics player. It's Ray. No, I'm kidding. It's Grant Long, of course. Grant Long. Yes, of course. Let's talk some goggles. Let's get to the goggles here. Grant Long. 1988. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
One thing I do want to mention about Grant Long connection here was I believe like 99% sure that he provided the color commentary along with Bob Rathburn for the 2004-2005.
Is that true? Nice.
That is true. Yes.
Incredible. There you go. Was he still wearing the goggles or what? Did he go to glasses, or you just
I think he was wearing glasses at that point. My memory is a little bit faded, but I
don't remember exactly what the color commentator was wearing for the time. Right. Come on, dude. What fan are you? Yeah. I was under the impression you were a super fan of the 2004-2005 Atlanta Hawks. Anyway, 1988, never a dull opportunity. You'll never miss an opportunity to bring up the night. What a prolific team. Like I swear to God, like once in a show, there's a connection to that damn team. Yeah. They never did anything.
Hey, listen, they won 13 beautiful games. So, yes.
Anyway, 1988-89, the expansion Heat, Miami Heat coming to the NBA for the season. Of course, like most expansion teams, they stink. It's a roster full of young players, journeymen, all that sort of stuff. Inaugural roster features first-round picks, Ronnie Cycli, Kevin Edwards, also the aforementioned Grant Long, who we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. Sylvester Gray, get NBA vets like Rory Sparrows there, John Sundelove, Pat Cummings, Scott Hastings, Pearl Washington, Billy Thompson. It's not a great bunch, and it doesn't go well. They start out the season by losing their first 17 games, including a blowout 138-91 loss to Magic Johnson's Los Angeles Lakers. So at the time, a historic NBA record losing streak there. So what did not help as well is that the Heat at this time, and we've talked about this in prior episodes, the Heat were placed in the Midwest division of the Western Conference, despite, of course, being located in Miami, which is not ideal to be in the Midwest of the Western Conference. They had the longest road trips in the NBA. Their nearest divisional opponent was the Houston Rockets, which is over 900 miles away from Miami. Did not help. They ended up with a 15-67 win-loss record, tied for the worst in franchise history. But Grant Long was a pleasant surprise his rookie year. He plays in all 82 games. He manages 11.8 points per game, 6.7 rebounds per game, 1.3 assists per game, plays 29.7 minutes per game as well. He went to Eastern Michigan, so we should note that he was a pretty a big player there in Eastern Michigan and pretty important player for that college as well. He plays a lot of minutes. He does lead the league in fouls with 337 in his rookie season, but still a pleasant surprise for a second-round pick to be as productive as Grant Long was. And then, he kind of plays a few years in Miami. Things aren't really going well in Miami. We're going to jump all the way to 1991-92. By the 92 season, Miami is a respectable team. They make their first playoff run here at a 38-44 record. They do go to the Eastern Conference, which is probably better for them, to play Eastern Conference teams as opposed to Western Conference teams. And Long is a key contributor for that 91-92 season as well. He starts all 82 games. He averages a career best 14.8 points per game. And the Miami Heat got a little bit of a team going here. They got Glenn Rice. They got Ronnie Cycli. They got Steve Smith. So they have some good names. They have some good talent here on the Heat. So 92-93, things kind of business as usual. They're an okay team. We'll jump to 93-94, where Long kind of starts to fall out of favor in Miami. Less really because of anything he did, but more because things just kind of started working out in Miami and they started really accumulating talent. Of course, the core is going to be Glenn Rice and Steve Smith, and they realize that. Grant Long really isn't a part of that core. And that 93-94 season is Miami's first winning season as well at 42-40. Then in a pretty big surprise to Grant Long, especially 94-95, just 2 games into the NBA season, Grant Long is traded to the Atlanta Hawks along with Steve Smith for Kevin Willis and a 1996 first round draft pick. Might seem a little weird that, like, wait a minute, Steve Smith and Grant Long for Kevin Willis and a draft pick. This is financially motivated as much as anything. The Heat were bad, kind of somewhat on purpose. They finished, 32-50. But the Arison family, namely Mickey Arison, was working to purchase the team. So they were kind of trying to get lean before that. So definitely kind of sucks because, Miami did have the building blocks of a pretty good team, but things would get back on track there for Miami pretty shortly after this. But we had some great quotes. The NBA Trades Tumblr account, which is one of the best blogs there is. I mean, just if you're ever interested in NBA trade, and they've written about it, and then NBA Trades Tumblr, it's just you get so many details. There's some two really cool quotes that I thought about as well. There's Heat guard Bimbo Coles. He talks about them trading Smith and Long. He goes, "They were our two captains," like the most morose quote possible. Then the other one as well is Grant Long was joking just days before this that he was the last original member of the Miami Heat, and then he's sent away. And he says, "Quote: Just as I was kidding about being the last Mohican, I'm gone." So last Mohican references. Definitely well used in 1994, 1995. So I appreciate the nod there. So Smith and Grant Long joined the Hawks team in the middle of their kind of own, on the fly rebuild. Smith and Long welcome additions to the team with Mookie Blaylock, Stacey Augmon headlining the core, and Grant Long, he plays pretty well. Steady presence in Atlanta's lineup. Plays 79 games. Same averages mostly, 11.7 points per game, 7.5 rebounds per game. Just solid production throughout. It does not last long, though, another year in Atlanta. And then in 96, 97, he is traded to the Detroit Pistons along with Stacey Augmon to Detroit for future draft picks. Long then departed, in Atlanta, 12.4 points per game, 8.6 rebounds per game. So pretty good line. And then, he becomes kind of a journeyman at this point. He bounces between Detroit. He goes to Atlanta again. He goes to Vancouver for a little bit, then makes the move from Vancouver to Memphis. And then finally, the reason we're here, Boston. Yes, Grant Long plays for the Boston Celtics. He joins Boston in January of 2003. This is the aforementioned team that we talked about with Anton Walker. This is a Boston team fresh off the Eastern Conference Finals berth. Grant Long is 36 at this point. He plays in only 41 games. He starts just one, and it was really more of a veteran presence more than anything. Did average 8 score 8 points in a game in April 2003, but largely was just kind of a guy on at the end of the bench, and then by the next year. He's out of the NBA and apparently into the booth for the Atlanta Hawks. So that is it. So only a few games there in Boston, but a good opportunity, probably our only opportunity ever to talk about Grant Long. So
yeah, this is a fabulous time for us all. Next, Orlando Wooldridge, who we have talked about a little bit here and there on this show, mostly in reference to Michael Jordan. But Wooldridge was a star at Notre Dame, was named second team All-American, also famously hit a last-second jumper that ended Ralph Sampson's University of Virginia team 28-game winning streak, back when Sampson, of course, was the biggest star in college basketball. Wooldridge's cousin was Willis Reed, so, of course, some basketball royalty there. Something I did not know until I looked it up, one of Orlando's nicknames was Oboe Cup, which I don't know if I buy that, but I'm going to go ahead and go with it anyway.
I like it, so I think we should. I think we should go with it. So let's do it.
Good old Oboe Cup. So yes, Oboe Cup was drafted 6th overall in 1981 for the Bulls. They at that point, actually, 81 was sort of the last decent team they had pre-Jordan. They had an aging Artis Gilmore, but a promisingly somewhat young nucleus with Dave Greenwood and Reggie Theus, but didn't have a great deal of success until they happened upon Michael Jordan in the 1984 draft. I might have talked about that before. I'm not 100% sure. Rich, do you recall us discussing that?
1980, yeah. Michael, nah. Anyway. Maybe once or twice, but yeah, I don't. We'll have to maybe do an episode about that. I'll put a circle around that. Mike Jordan. Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about that one. Yes. So Wooldridge at that point, became the by default because the Bulls didn't really have much talent. Was the Bulls' second best player next to Jordan? Was extremely talented. He was a great dunker. He competed in a couple dunk contests. Was a good scorer. He wasn't like super efficient, but he was not inefficient. I mean, he had, field goal percentages around, 50 to 55%. Actually was a solid, a pretty good offensive player. Wasn't even really a chucker, but didn't really do much else. Didn't play defense, not much of a passer, not a great rebounder, and not a great fit with Jordan, who they got rid of pretty soon after the 86 season. Wooldridge ended up signing with the Nets in the 87 season, but didn't have a lot of success there. Ended up being suspended for most of the next season because of a substance abuse policy violation. The 89 season, he ended up reviving his career a little bit. Mm-hmm. He signed with the Lakers, played a couple of years there in a bench role, helped the team return to the finals in 89. And unfortunately for the Lakers, was not able to complete a third title in a row.
Don't want to pay Pat. Yeah, we don't want
to pay Pat. Yeah, so was not able to accomplish that. And then we talked about the trade, of course, to the 1990 Nuggets. I will also mention that they officially had the fastest pace in NBA history. One of these days we'll have to look at how far their pace went from the average pace of that time, because I'm sure the 91 was fairly fast, but certainly was not like late 70s fast. So I bet if you compare it to the average, I bet it's even more impressive. But also had one of the 13 worst SRSs in NBA history. I believe they had one of the worst defensive ratings in NBA history as well. So, as we said, we're going to dig into. We do actually genuinely promise to dig into them.
Yeah, that's a show that we definitely need to do. Yeah, we need to watch some games, maybe a live. We gotta dig into this team. This is our new thing that we got to do. So hopefully the Nuggets win the NBA Finals, so we can.
I need some more Blair Rasmussen in my life.
Yes, exactly. We'll bring Rainus on and ask him about what he knows about Blair Rasmussen.
So. Exactly. So, anyway, after a stop in Denver, he ended up playing a couple years with the Pistons, stopped a bit with the Bucks and the 76ers before moving on to play 2 years in Italy under Coach Mike D'Antoni in the Italian
League. There he goes. Yeah, we can't get away from D'Antoni this season.
Yeah, we can't. No. Then I'd forgotten this, but he was actually a WNBA coach for the Sparks for a couple of seasons in the late 90s.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he passed away at age only 52 in 2012. He had a long battle with heart disease. So sad there, but yeah, he did some interesting things. After his playing career, kind of was able to. Obviously had the drug issues and other things going on early on in his career, but he ended up having a solid career and had some fun moments.
Yeah, I would say and largely sort of unfortunately remembered as like the guy that was there before Jordan got there, and then once Jordan got there, sort of sent away. But yeah, no, I think a pretty good career and yet another. I mean, a long line of guys that you can go in that era where it's like had the drugs not been as big of an issue. What could his career have been? But you could definitely see, the potential there, and then like a big drop off, and then it's tough for him to ever kind of get back on track after the suspension and missing most of the season, and it was a big problem in the NBA. And there's plenty of players like Wooldridge where you do wonder, man, like what could have been had not been for these issues. So.
Absolutely.
All right, so move on to our final kind of breakout player here for the Heat and Celtics. It is Shaquille. Nah, I'm kidding. It's Sherman Douglas. Come on. All-time great college basketball player for Syracuse. Sets the all-time NBA assist record with the Syracuse Orangemen in 1989. Then becomes the Heat's starting point guard in 1989-90, their second season. Like Grant Long, he's a second-round draft pick, but comes out of the gates and he's pretty good. As a rookie, he averages 14.3 points per game, earns a spot on the NBA's all-rookie first team as well. The Heat are still bad, as we mentioned, but, that's fine. 1991, Douglas is scoring and assists jump up a bunch, 18.5 points per game, 8.5 assists per game. He's actually named the team's most valuable player as well. They still stink. They're 24-58, but that's fine because you got a player. You got a second-round pick. That's your team's most valuable player, and he's scoring 18.5 points per game. Like, you're not going to complain too much. By 91-92, Sherman Douglas realizes, wait a minute, I was drafted in the second round, and I'm well overplaying, my contract. So he holds out before the season. Miami, not very fond of this move. That does not enjoy that very much. So after 5 games, he is dealt to the Boston Celtics. So both Brian Shaw, they're kind of bored of Brian Shaw in Boston. Miami's kind of done with Sherman Douglas in Miami, and they decide, hey, why don't we trade our, disgruntled point guards for each other, and they do. And Douglas goes on to play what I would say probably the best basketball of his entire career for the Boston Celtics. 92, he joins a pretty old but still pretty star-filled Celtics team to make it all the way to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. Douglas kind of doesn't find his role immediately, only scores 7.3 points per game, 4.1 assists per game, but still he's on a really, really good team, and he's competing for not really, I guess wouldn't say really competing for NBA titles anymore, but at least getting into the playoffs. After not being there for many years with Miami. But 92-93, though, he does assume a bigger role on the team. He starts 38 games. He scores 7.8 points per game, dishes out 6.4 assists per game. Celtics regress a bit. They lose in the NBA's first round. They'll win 48 games that year. 93-94. Unfortunately, Douglas's, real best season as a Celtic, or maybe his second best season as a Celtic, 13.3 points per game, 8.8 assists per game. But Boston falls to 32 wins and misses the playoffs for the first time since 1979. 94-95, Boston kind of gets back on track a little bit, and they get 35 wins. That's good enough to get into the Eastern Conference playoffs. Douglas averages 14.7 points per game, 6.9 assists per game. But Boston will lose in the first round to the upstart Orlando Magic. And then 95-96, 10 games into the season, Sherman Douglas is moved to Milwaukee. He has a quote here that I found out in the AP. He says, "I haven't paid that much attention to the Bucks, but I know they have two great players. I like their chances. I think they'll be right there." Those two great players, of course, are Vin Baker and Glenn Robinson. And the Bucks, they were right there, except, well, not really. They finished 25-57, so they weren't very good. And Douglas played well, 11.5 points per game, 5.8 assists per game. Started, 62 games for the Bucks that year, but did not go very well. 96-97, Douglas is reunited with his former Celtics coach, Chris Ford. Milwaukee does improve to 33-49, but they still miss the playoffs. Douglas again finishes 9.7 points per game, 5.4 assists per game. But as my time in Milwaukee, I should say, does not last very long. September 1997, he's traded in a 3-team trade to the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's the Sean Kemp trade as well. Vin Baker moves, a bunch of other guys move. Terrell Brandon moves. We've talked about that trade a few times as well. And then he's traded by Cleveland to Denver. So that he's actually one of the guys that plays for 3 of the teams that we're talking about here. He's waived by the Denver Nuggets pretty immediately after, so I don't know if he actually ever played a game with them. Then he signs with the Nuggets. He gets released by the Nuggets. He signs with the Clippers. He signs with the Nuggets again. And he just kind of bounces around from there, which kind of stinks because Sherman Douglas did have a really good NBA career. And he was, at the time, I mean, you go back to the early 90s, you go back to those Boston Celtics teams. Like, he, again, was a really, really good player for those teams and felt like a guy that was going to be kind of the bridge between the next generation of, the Boston Celtics, and, pretty famous for his floater. He wasn't a good outside shooter, but a fast player, a guy that could get to the rim, get a floater up, score a bunch, pass a bunch, like just a solid, really, really solid player, but never seemed to find his footing, never seemed to find an NBA home, and ended up bouncing around a bunch and kind of ended up with a career that maybe is largely forgotten, but shouldn't be. And one fun fact about, not fun for Sherman, I guess, is he played Michael Jordan 30 times in his career and lost to Michael Jordan and the Bulls every one of those 30 times. So.
Yeah, I had to check that one and verify that one because I had a hard time believing that, but it is true.
I did too. I was like, really? Yeah. Like, not even one? Like, not one game? No, not one. No.
Yeah, 27 times in the regular season and 3 times in the playoffs.
Not a one.
Yeah, that really should have come up in Last Dance, really.
You're right.
Like,
yeah.
Due to Michael Jordan. Because there has to be something going on there. That's pretty crazy. But yeah, that was a fun one. Nice to dig into Sherman Douglas. Our last one is a recent addition to the Basketball Hall of Fame, Charlie Scott.
Yes.
Started his career as an all-star with the Virginia Squires of the ABA, where he played alongside Julius Erving. But late in the 1972 season, he decided, I'm not really super into this, and then defected from the ABA to the NBA with the Phoenix Suns, in which he'd have 3 all-star seasons. Then he was traded to the Celtics before the 1976 season for Paul Westphal, which worked out pretty well for both guys. Westphal became a star in Phoenix, and Scott became an NBA champ for the Celtics. And if the Celtics famously beat the Suns in that NBA Finals, one of the more famous finals in NBA history, particularly the triple overtime Game 5. But the Celtics by 1978 season were in rebuilding mode. It was John Havlicek's last season. The key guys had gotten older. They'd lost Paul Silas, and they were struggling. And during that season, Scott was traded to the Lakers for Kermit Washington, who kind of was basically forced out of the LA after the punch of Tom Donovich.
Yeah.
The Celtics also reacquired Don Chaney, who had been Charlie Scott's backcourt partner during that time as well. Longtime Celtic Don Chaney, who'd gone to the ABA, then come back to the NBA, of course, after the merger. Scott ended up, ending his last couple seasons in his career, and I kind of forgot he played for the Nuggets. Ended up playing for a pretty good Nuggets team in the 79 season. They were only 47-35, but that was during a time in which the competitive balance of the NBA was a lot stronger because of the merger and for a few other reasons. So that team, better than I think its record indicated, they had David Thompson, they had George McGinnis, they had Dan Issel. They actually were coached for much of that season by Larry Brown, but in Larry Brown fashion, decided to abandon the team in the mid-season, and then basically said, "Oh yeah, I'm tired of coaching. I need to quit." And then a few weeks or months later, went to UCLA to coach. So that was fun. And
I'm surprised Larry Brown, of all people. I mean, he's usually just so committed to his job. If he says, "I'm here with you guys, I'm going to do this job," for him to just bail out of nowhere is just very uncharacteristic for one Larry Brown. So I can't believe it. So I'll have to double check and make sure you're correct there. But
I appreciate you
talking about the same Larry Brown, right?
Yeah. The Larry Brown played for the Nuggets. Was new to coaching at this point, or relatively new to coaching at this point. But yes, and then the Nuggets fell in the playoffs to Scott's former Lakers team, one of several. I believe that would be the first of the Nuggets' losses to the Lakers in the playoffs. I believe they've had 3 series, and the Lakers have won them all. To double check that one. And then the next season, which is Scott's final season, the Nuggets ended up falling off with a losing record. They were coached by Donnie Walsh, Larry Brown's old friend. Thompson was hurt that season. McGinnis ended up being traded for Alex English, which long term was very, very good for the Nuggets, but short term was, Alex English was still kind of young and unproven. So, things would turn up for the Nuggets, but it did take a while. They'd get Doug Moe in there, and then things would be pretty good for them in the 80s. Just not quite as good as it would be for the Lakers.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
All right, so a few other players as well that played for Miami and Boston. I feel like we at least have to mention a little bit. Shaquille O'Neal, of course, played for both Miami and Boston. Joe Johnson, believe it or not, did play for Miami. I don't think anybody really remembers that Miami run. And how could you with the Atlanta Hawks runs, that fresh in your mind?
Sure, absolutely.
He played for Miami recently. Jermaine O'Neal played for both of them. Ricky Davis played for both Miami and Boston. P.J. Brown, Eddie House, Kelly Olynyk, currently playing, for the Miami Heat. Ray Allen, and also Gary Payton as well, which is one that people wanted us to touch on. So these are all fun players. But we've talked about Gary Payton. We've talked about, I guess we haven't talked about Eddie House or Kelly Olynyk. So I guess we could have done that. But I'm glad we talked about Sherman Douglas and Grant Long instead. So
yeah,
do you have some other famous Nuggets and Lakers?
I do have a few. A couple are current, actually. J.R. Smith and JaVale McGee.
I forget he's on the Lakers now.
Yeah. They, of course, play for the Lakers now. They both recently played for the Nuggets. Timofey Mozgov, of course, famous Lakers free agent signee of recent vintage, of course, played for the Nuggets, was traded to the Cavs, helping LeBron James. Well, I guess he wasn't really an important player on the 2016 championship team, but the 2015 finals team obviously was key for that. Corey Brewer, you may have forgotten, played for the Lakers. Danny Shays played very, very briefly for the Lakers, played a long time for the Nuggets. I think Shays played a total of 13 games for the Lakers in the 94 season. So was a teammate of Nick Van Exel.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, that's awesome.
And I wonder if he told them how things are in Denver. Matt Calvin of ABA fame had a brief stint with the Lakers toward the end of his career. And same with John Roach, who was a early star for the Nets in the ABA, and near the end of his career, he had a stint. Well, he had a stint actually in the 76 season. He actually left the Stars folded, of course, in the 76 season, and then he left the ABA, went to the Lakers, and only averaged 3.5 minutes per game in 15 games, and did not have any kind of significant role. And then was out of the NBA for 3 seasons. He played in Italy during that time, and then came back to the NBA, played 3 seasons with the Nuggets to end his career at age 32. So kind of an interesting path for him. And then Matt Calvin, kind of a similar type of situation. although he didn't immediately leave the ABA. He played for the Squires in their final season. They lasted the entire season, but in the 77 season, he actually played for 3 separate teams: the Lakers for 12 games, the Spurs for 35 games, and the Nuggets for 29 games. And played for 77 and 78 for some really strong Nuggets teams.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
and of course he had also played for the 75 Nuggets, who were also an excellent team, but then they ended up trading him away when they got David Thompson and Dan Issel, and ended up going to the finals for the next season. So 2 different stints with the Nuggets, both the ABA version and the NBA version.
So we actually got one other one. This is an interesting one that came through us on Twitter, and let me know what you think of this one. I don't know if it counts all the way. I wonder if it does count for you. So Steve Mix, who I think we've talked about recently. Did we talk about Steve Mix with Curtis?
Yeah,
we did. We've talked Steve Mix before many times. So he has the rare distinction. I would assume he's the only person in the world to ever do this. Maybe, I don't know. We'll have to do some research. In 1971-72, he played 1 game for the then ABA Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, actually, the Rockets. They were
the Denver Rockets at the time too. So whatever you want to do with that, you can do that. Right. And then in 1982-83, he plays 1 game for the Los Angeles Lakers, and that's it. So. I don't. What do you official ruling?
Well, I mean, yes, he officially did.
1 game each for 2 franchises. Rules.
Yeah, I remember now that he had a very brief ABA stint. I had forgotten it was just 1 day. I thought he played. I thought he played more than 1 game.
I thought so too. But
I'm surprised. But did he play in the playoffs at all?
That's a possibility. Yeah, because they did bring him in later in the year, so maybe they brought him in as a reserve. So actually, hold on. Let me, I'm at his page right now, as I'm always. I'm usually on Steve Mix's reference page. So, I mean, where else do you go?
Right.
Let's see if he played in the playoffs, because that would make
he did. He played 8 games.
Yes. Yeah. There we go. Okay.
Well, that makes a little more sense, but I'm assuming he did not play in the ABA playoffs that year, so that would be quite remarkable.
That would be awesome.
Yes. So, that's obviously very interesting. So, that's a great one. That's a great find. Who found that one for us?
That is, I don't know if Roman Spirtku. I think it's at RAMAYS. RAMAYS. So Ramus, I believe is how you say it. So I believe the person is Russian. So I'm probably mispronouncing it a lot, but yes, we got.
We apologize for that, but we appreciate you you sharing that with us. That's
a great one.
That's a great fact. Yes, and yes, as you alluded to earlier, because I know that our fans care very deeply about this, I verified that none of the original Denver Nuggets, the franchise that played only 1 season in the NBA 1950 before folding, that just happened to have the same name as the current Denver Nuggets franchise, ever played for the Lakers.
Good.
So,
okay.
And to circle a thread, I was off on the Lakers Nuggets playoff history. They have actually, their current series is the 7th time they have played in the playoffs. So the Lakers have won all the previous instances. The last time was 2012 when the Lakers beat the Nuggets in the 2012 first round.
Oh, man.
So, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know about this year either. Things aren't going well.
Not looking well. Of course, the Nuggets they're notorious for that. So
yes.
So we'll see if they can pull
Come
that
on,
off.
Denver.
Maybe they just want to make it like a little bit challenging, and they want to get down 3-0.
Yeah, that's what they've been doing lately. So yeah, maybe that's what they're trying to do. Because honestly, if they win the NBA Finals, like, we have to do that episode about the 1991. And we're still going to do it anyway, but then it would make a little bit more sense why we're deciding to randomly decide, to jump into the previous best Denver Nuggets team ever is, that team. So,
yes. Yeah. By the way, for what it's worth, this is the 4th time for the Celtics and the Heat. The Celtics and Heat met in 2010, 2011, and 2012. 2010, the Celtics won. That was pre-LeBron, of course, and 2011 and 2012, the Heat won. I'd forgotten in 2012 the Celtics actually took it to 7 games. That was that's interesting. So,
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's all right.
And then LeBron crushed him at the end. So.
yeah. That did happen sometimes. All right, so that was fun. I enjoyed that. Nice little
There you go.
Look at the Heat and the Celtics and the Lakers and Nuggets. We'll have to do that again for future. Maybe even maybe the NBA Finals we can we can touch on that. Except, I guess, any of the scenario of those two teams would be pretty fun. So
yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Boston and Lakers. What else are we going to talk about with the Boston Celtics and the Lakers? There's no history. There's not to go back to for those guys. Probably maybe the second time they've ever met in the finals. I can't even off the top of my head. I can't even remember. So
nothing interesting there. Yeah,
there's just nothing to talk about with the Celtics and the Lakers in the finals.
Right, it wouldn't be good. Yeah, so
Heat Nuggets though. That's now we're talking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Looking forward to that one. So we'll see how it goes. But yes, thanks everyone for checking us out. Hopefully you enjoyed this. You can find us at thestepback@fansided.com. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Over and Back NBA in both places. We're on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher, pretty much any platform in which you get podcasts. We're there. If you want to leave us a rating and or review, we would greatly appreciate it. So thanks for listening, and we'll be back again soon.